Okay.
Hello, Grid Investor Network. This is Danielle Palloschi-Browne and Raj Tamang, and we're here for part 2 of our construction estimate series. And today we're going to be talking about structural components and how to estimate those when you're considering a project. So, Raj, I'm really excited because we've got like quite the list of things we're going to talk about, like how to estimate today.
Yeah.
So where do you, when you're considering building a new construction home, or for yourself as a flip or a development project, or for a client, where do you start with estimating? Like, I guess let's start at the bottom, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Last week we talked about the outside work, right? Site work, demo, erosion control.
Yep.
It's mostly not directly related to building house itself, but the preparation, site preparation, which is also a significant amount of your budget. Now, for the structure itself, today we're talking about more the structural component, right? You have a structural component in a building, and non-structural, which is, for example, when you say structural, all these concrete foundations, walls, beams, columns, framing, floor system, roof system, all those are a structural component. Anything finishes like roofing, siding, drywalls, flooring, cabinet, those are non-structural, right? So the structural component of a house is very major. The reason I'm saying is, let's say, I'll give you an example. If you're building a house in McLean, in our area, which is the most expensive neighborhood in Virginia, let's go down to maybe Woodbridge, Dumfries, or Manassas, which is a less expensive area. Think about if you're building a same house in two places, the cost of construction structural is the same if you're building the same house. So somebody's saying, hey, I'm building the same house in McLean. Why this $3 million? And the same house, if you go to Manassas, nobody going to pay $3 million for that house, right?
No.
So usually, exactly, no. But you have to remember the structural component doesn't matter what you build. I mean, pricing per unit in Texas or Florida versus our area is different because that's a long distance. But for us from here, like within 10, 15 miles of distance, the actual cost of construction for the same material, same trade is not a difference, right? It should be the same.
Yeah, it's the same.
It's the same. So if you build the same house in McLean, same house in Manassas, the actual cost is the same. So what is the difference? It's the finishes. The finishes is completely different because in McLean $3 million home, maybe I'm putting $35,000, $40,000 appliances. In Manassas, definitely not, right?
No.
But the structural component is always there. You have to remember that. So when you say structural
component, keystones of the project, the keystones of the property, it's going to cost you roughly the same whether you're in Manassas or you're in McLean.
Yeah, the structural is the same because you think about this, and you need a concrete footing. Doesn't matter what you build, you need concrete footing for that structure, right? You need a concrete slab on the basement. You need a concrete wall. You need a wood framing. That doesn't matter. You need it, right? So you have to, when you do the cost estimate, if you don't pay attention, oh yeah, I'm gonna build a house, same house that you have in McLean. I'm paying $3 million, but I'm gonna, I want that house in 1.5 in Manassas. That's not gonna work because your cost of construction is almost the same. So you need to understand the ones that will really affect your cost, the ones that you can control, and the ones that you can control. Like the structural component, you cannot control. You need it.
Yeah, it is what it is. Like you need to put the house on something, no matter where that house is.
It is, but some of the things you can make changes is finishes. Exterior, for example, instead of the brick and the hardy siding and the stucco, which are more expensive, you probably do vinyl siding, which is like cost is like 1/3, right? Same thing inside finishing, doors and window. If you have a lot of big windows and doors openings, that's definitely cost. So those are the things you have to keep in mind. So what I'm basically saying that when you're getting a cost estimate from the contractor, please make sure that you're comparing apple to apple. People don't, because like I said, I have seen some of the builders, they give you $100 per square feet, and you are trying to get the similar product in from another builder, and which another builder might say no, 150. There's something not right. From the same location, if I'm building a house in Manassas or let's say Northern Virginia, and I have another builder almost similar size, similar, you know, a type of a business,
Mm-hmm.
and their price is like 100 to 150, there's something not right, right? Or
Yeah.
either you have to think about it, there's just some structural component or the size of the house or finishes. People always call me, hey, why you are charging so much? Hey, I have another builder. We're building 100 homes a year. You don't even build 100. You build 10 homes, but looks like I thought that you smaller builders would be cheaper. That's why I want to work with you. And I said, no, a smaller builder doesn't mean
No.
we are cheaper. It's a different. It's opposite. It's not we are expensive. It's not the same product.
Yeah, it's there. It's much more customized and it's much more unique, really,
Unique,
in
yeah.
a lot of those things. So, okay, so what other things could affect the cost? That same foundation in Manassas or McLean, what other things could affect the cost in terms of like increasing the cost? Like, what about, I don't know, I'm thinking like if you were in Boise, which I know is further from where we are typically, but there's a lot of homes that build like A-frame homes. So like not necessarily a concrete foundation or maybe a partial foundation of some kind, but a lot of them are on a hill. Like you're on a mountain ski chalet kind of a community. How can having a site like that affect cost?
Oh yeah, it does, because when you have a site like that, you most likely have to build a retaining wall to make, because you
Mm-hmm.
have to remember, when you have a house, your floor should be flat, right? So if the slope is your ground is slope, first of all you have to think about making the ground slope on not slope, flat, right? So to make it
Mm-hmm.
flat, one way to do it is a retaining wall. So that depending on how tall of a retaining wall it is, how long, the cost will definitely in effect. But some of the things, like I said, yes, if you have a house structure, you need a foundation. That's simple, right? You
Yeah.
don't have a house structure without foundations. When you have a typical house, it's concrete foundation system. So let me explain. Typically, there are three type of homes in terms of foundation system. One is in our area, basement, right? You have a full basement.
Mm-hmm.
In some places, sometime go to other places like North Carolina or Florida, Texas. There is no basement. Your
Yeah.
foundation system is
Mm-hmm.
completely different. You don't need a foundation wall. You just need a slab on grade, and you have just footing around it. The concrete is
Mm-hmm.
significantly less. There's some for example, you see a crawl space. The crawl space is typically done next to water or flood area. So if there's a flooding, water will come underneath, just go away, flow through the house, right? You see a
Yep.
lot of crawl space foundation system next to water. That's why you go to Ocean City, Virgin Beach. It's all the houses like crawl space. You don't have any living space below the main level, and it's all open. So when you have a
Mm-hmm.
crawler space, of course you have a little bit of space on a crawler space. Usually 18 inch is a minimum required to 2 feet, 3 foot is a crawler space. So when you have that, you have to have a wall around it, crawler space wall, almost a foundation wall, and with that you have to have a footing. Footing is always
Yeah.
wider than wall. The idea is the wall will it will sit on the footing. It's like our body has a leg. Is, let's say, the way I describe in layman's term is, my head is a roof. My body is a
Yep.
floor framing system. My legs are foundation system or basement walls. Then my footing are footing. My feet are your footings, right? The purpose of the
Yes.
foot is you distribute the load into the ground so
Mm-hmm.
that you don't fall down or you don't sink. So that's why your footing is always wider, because you have to remember, if the footing is narrow, because of the load coming from above, the whole building can collapse or
It just
sink.
sinks straight down.
So that's why you have to make a wider. So rule of thumb, if you have a bad soil, means you have to make a wider footing.
Yep.
If it's good soil, means you don't have to go wide as much, right? So that's all part of the design to make sure that your building is structurally sound, especially foundation system. So you have to look at it when you get a custom estimate. It is slab on grade foundation system, means there is no crawl space or no basement like in Florida and Texas.
Mm-hmm.
If it is a crawl space, it's a different cost. If it's a fully buried basement like us, yes, you have a concrete wall, you have footing, but also with that, you have to remember if it's a whack out basement, maybe then you don't need an area way. Means area way is to access basement from outside, not from the inside the house, but outside. If it's fully buried basement, you have to make an area way so people living in the basement can get outside.
Yeah.
Without actually coming into the house. That's an additional cost. But if you have a whack out basement, you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
That's something
So what kind of numbers could we put with that then? Like in terms of what's a typical cost per square foot ish to make a basement in Northern Virginia in our not great clay soil? Like what on average would that look like? If you were in Manassas or McLean, it might run you this.
It's a little bit different. Okay. The reason I'm saying I'll give you, if you have a foundation system in our area and if you have a regular siding or a stucco or hardy siding, your concrete walls are usually 8-inch thick. Concrete wall, basement wall. But you have to remember, if you have a actual brick veneer or a stone veneer, actual 4-inch brick veneer, then the brick needs a lid. On a concrete wall, you have to make a lid what the brick can sit on.
Got it. So you actually need a thicker wall if you have like a stone or a brick water table or veneer.
Right. If it is actual thickness. But nowadays you have like calcium stone or thin stone or thin brick veneer. Those are not real big. It's a real brick, but it's very thin. You are actually cladding or attaching to the wall. So you don't need.
It's almost like the thickness of a tile now. Like they have them where they're really, really thin.
Yes. So those ones you don't need legs, right? You don't need to. It doesn't need to sit on the bottom. But if you have a real brick that you see, it's like a 4-inch, 3.5-inch. It needs a legs, so it has to sit on. So your concrete wall has to be thickened. So rule of thumb is that if you have a brick, the wall has to be minimum 10-inch. See. So instead of minimum 8-inch, you need a 10-inch concrete wall because you need a 4-inch legs. Then you need another 6-inch inside at least because the wall is usually 2x4, 2x6. You don't want to make the wall thinner because you have to remember sometimes brick can go all the way down, right? If it is walkout basement, you want to have a brick. The brick can actually go all the way down to the footing. So the wall thickness, concrete thickness behind the wall, it has to be minimum 6 inch, otherwise it's too thin.
Got that. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. And so say you wanted like real brick or real stone and you wanted to add that extra 2-inch lip, like what kind of cost addition could that look like? Like I'm trying to put like some kind of a number to it. And I know that's really hard to do and things are very custom. But I have a feeling other people are probably curious about that as well. So like if you were to do that and we're excluding the cost of the bricks, but like we're just focusing on the cost of actually pouring the foundation, what might that look like?
So this is what I usually do in our office. Let's say our best price, it starts from $150 per square feet. That's the best price. Okay. 150.
And that's not like appliances. That's not like when we're talking about
the whole construction. Right? No, it does include, but what it does not include is permit, engineering cost, site development cost. After house is done, you have to do landscape, driveway, walkway, all those things is not included. A couple of $100,000. That's not included. The utilities.
I was going to say, like 150 square foot is very inexpensive from what I have heard, but that makes sense. You're missing.
Yeah, those are not included. Those are not included because you have to remember I'm talking about high-end areas because we don't do 100. There are a lot of builders they do 100, but their specification is different than ours. That's what I was always telling. When somebody is comparing me with someone, another builder who can do 100 and mine is 150, I told him, okay, you are not even willing to understand what is the difference is, then you are not a right fit for me. I'm not trying to rip you off. It's just that our products are different.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
So that's what I was saying. When you say 150, Danielle, so if you have a finished basement, square footage, it's the same thing. The square footage of the basement is, let's say, 2,500 square feet times 150. If I have unfinished basement, I usually do 125 unfinished basement. But when you say unfinished basement, we're gonna do roughing and stuff like that, all the plumbing and get it ready for the homeowner to finish it down the road. But that's also include the preparations, right? You have to have the concrete wall and floors and slab, all of that. But I would say, at least in our area, again, high-end custom home, luxury homes, you have builders, their best price starts to 50, 300 too. There are a lot of builders.
That's why I was like, 150, that seems we're missing something. And that something was like structural engineering, site planning, permits, like all that, which makes complete sense. So it's not unheard of for all-in costs to be 250 to 300 a square foot for a house. And the truth is that cost can be relayed, like, it very much depends. Like, you have your types of builders and contractors who are, they have their spec home, they have their plan, which they just then adjust to the topography of this specific lot, and they just lather, rinse, repeat, right? Over and over and over again. And there are benefits to that because of speed and things like that, but there's also some big downsides to it, right? And not just the customizable part. It doesn't really relay to like those prices. If you are looking to do a major renovation on a property, to do a value add transition on that property, and not completely do a tear down, then those numbers that you're hearing are not necessarily always applicable to all of those things, but it's something that you should definitely be mindful of, because if you're say you're doing like a major renovation and but you're keeping the basement, or you have to dig out the basement. I had actually worked on a project like that a year ago where we dug out the basement 6 inches to make it the ceiling height 8 feet in the basement, which is really pretty bare minimum in most cases. In new construction, like, everyone's really going for 9 feet. But when you're not trying to build new construction, you're trying to cut costs in other ways as a developer, like, that's one way to do it. We dug down 6 inches so we could have an 8-foot ceiling and keep the basement floor plan the way that it was, because it was fine. We just needed 3 egress windows. So we had egress windows and dug down. You're going to want to put into the costs, what is it going to cost to dig out that basement? In this case, we were in Arlington. I think it was a $20,000 cost to dig out about 1,100 square foot basement, with the egress windows as well, because we had to pour those. But to be honest, that basement would not have been usable because you need a minimum of 7.5 feet. So you start the cost, the pros and cons list. We also knew we were going to sell this house at the end for around $1.8 million. I don't know anybody who's willing to spend $1.8 million and not have a basement they can walk into without hitting their head on the ceiling.
Exactly.
And it cannot be finished because it's not legal living space unless you have that over 7.5 feet anyway. So considering those costs and like, hey, it might cost this much. And that sounds like a big, scary number, right? Like 20 grand to any project is not like a small amount of money, but you have to think of the ripple effects. So like specifically with structural elements like that, we dug out that basement. We dug it out to literally within an inch of the utility line. So that was as far as we could go. Yeah. And honestly, it was really worth it in that case.
It does. Like you said, if it's only 7.5 feet, getting another 6 foot, 6 inches will give you enough headroom to use as livable space. Another thing you have to remember, if you already have a basement only 6 foot high now, or 7'6", you have to remember the $20,000 is not just going down 6 inches. You have to break the concrete. Now, once you break it, that concrete is gone. Now you have to dig it and pour the new concrete. So your cost of concrete to pour a new slab doing all the work. You have to do engineering, don't get a permit from the county or city. All of that is cost added. Um,
Yep.
Even in the Arlington, part of the Arlington, DC, where you have a house in only like 6 foot or 7 foot only headroom in the basement, and you have to do another 1 foot, 2 foot. You have to do underpinning, and when you do underpinning, now your cost is all of a sudden like it's not $20,000, it's a $50,000. Not just the cost, because of time consuming and the permit process, it's a tedious, right?
Oh, for sure. And until that's done, you cannot do anything else.
Yeah.
Like,
You cannot do anything. Exactly. You don't want
you
your
cannot
house to fall down
at all with the rest of the project. But when you're viewing homes to potentially flip or develop, it's also important. Like, one of the things I do all the time when I am going to check out properties for clients or for myself to flip or develop, and a lot of times I'm looking for more, not necessarily new construction, building from the ground up, but I'm looking for more opportunities where we can actually do a major renovation or a big value add improvement. I always bring a laser measurer and a measuring tape. And I always figure out, in a couple of different spaces in the basement, you want to go in the corners and in the middle. And I'm 6 foot tall exactly. So I also know, hey, if it's feeling kind of close to the top of my head, that's probably not great in terms of ceiling height. And I always check that. It's such a big deal, especially in like DC in particular. There's a lot of laws that prevent you from raising a house up a little bit or digging down, especially homes that are semi-attached or attached. So it's, a big trick is to make sure you measure those basements when you're viewing the properties to see what you can do. And if you plan on doing a really big renovation, it might not be a big deal. Sometimes you don't dig down. Sometimes you lift the first floor up a little bit, but that's all of that is not cheap. So you have to make sure it makes sense for your project.
It's not cheap. Those are the things, like I say, you have to keep in mind. And all this one is also start on the design. You have to look at the design. So that's why when somebody say, hey, I'm trying to build a house this much, hey, what is the cost? So I need a complete set of drawing, architectural drawing, all the structural drawing. Structural drawings means a drawing that's showing all the structural component I discussed now, right? All the wood framing or concrete foundation system, floor framing, beams and columns, and all those things. It also makes a difference. So, you have to give me a complete set of drawings to give you the accurate estimate. Usually when I have somebody say, what is the cost? I just give them a ballpark, but I told them, especially now, I cannot give you any fixed price, even for 30 days. Unfortunately, everything is changing every 2 weeks, right?
It's crazy.
It's crazy now, but at least these are the things you have to remember. Hey, before you asking, give me a price. Okay, you have to give me a complete drawing, a specification. What kind of? You cannot say, we talked about this one before. You cannot say cabinet, dude. What kind of cabinet do you want in your house? Do you want? I can build a $5,000 cabinet in a kitchen, or do you want a $50,000 cabinet, appliances? All those specifications you have to have in mind before you are asking a fixed price from your contractor. Otherwise, if you are asking a fixed price and you don't have this specification, you are in trouble because you don't know what you're getting. And when you get it, most likely this is not what you want. And I'm telling you, happen many times, happen every day in our business. So all these things you always have to clarify or with your builder, with your client, what you want, what is included. Is the roof is siding, vinyl siding or brick. So all these things, as I say again, you have a brick, right? Because of the brick, now all of a sudden concrete wall is thicker. That means more money, right? You cannot say, hey, how come now you give me 100,000 more? Oh, it's not just the cost of the brick. Because of the brick, now footing has to be wider because a brick is a weight. It has a weight. It's like 40 pounds per linear foot height because the 4-inch actual brick, it's heavy. So that weight goes to the foundation system. Now your footing is wider. So it's not the weight of the concrete, weight of or brick, but also because of it, now you have another 15, 20 grand you added to your concrete foundation system. People don't understand. Right? You have to explain. But that's what I will say is that if somebody is saying 100 and another person is saying 150, there should be some difference. Try to understand rather than to, hey, you're too expensive guy, I don't want to talk to you. Sometimes people do that. Oh, you're too expensive. But before that, try to understand why you're expensive, what is included, what is not included, why is making 150 versus 100 or 200 or 220, right? So these are all factors you have to keep in mind. And like we talked about this before, it could be concrete foundation wall or it could be masonry wall. Usually in new construction these days, you don't see masonry walls anymore. But in the old construction, you see masonry walls or crawl space. If you have a crawl space, even nowadays, new construction, they do masonry walls because it's easy to build.
Yeah.
Easy to build. Yeah, exactly. But in pretty much all new construction, we do a concrete foundation system in this area. So that's what I would do. And also, you have to definitely understand the height of the basement, right? You have a 9-foot basement or 10-foot basement or 8-foot basement, because that makes a huge difference. And
totally.
I think maybe we can talk about only concrete foundation system today, and we can take it to the other part of the structural component on next week.
Yes.
But one thing I'm going to tell you is this one is something you have to keep in mind. Okay, your basement wall, we say 9-foot, 10-foot, 11-foot, 12-foot. But typically the standard you have to say, when you say 9-foot wall, usually it's not 9-foot wall. This is why, okay? Because the concrete formwork, you have to make a formwork for the pour a concrete wall. Because usually with the concrete foundation and the basement, they pour footing first, concrete footing, then they make a formwork for the wall, and they pour a wall. But the formwork always comes usually standard height. It's 9-foot, 8-foot, 10-foot, 12-foot, like that. Okay, it doesn't come like inches. Because there's a standard height. Always they built it. These are all metal formwork. Usually you don't. If you start making this formwork for a specific height because that's what you want, now all of a sudden it becomes more expensive. I'm not saying that you can't have it whatever you want. You want like a 9.5, 9 foot and 6 inches. That's okay. But then all of a sudden you are adding a cost versus going to exactly 10 foot because all the formwork comes in standard height. But now the problem is you have to remember, if you have a 9-foot basement, it's not really 9 foot. Why? You have to remember your formwork concrete wall is 9 foot. You pour the concrete. Now you need a concrete slab basement. You pour that basement slab on the top of the footing. So that 4 inches is gone now. Out of 9 foot, now you only have 8 and 8 inches.
Yeah.
If somebody tell you 9 foot exactly, so it's not 9 foot, okay? Because if you do exactly 9 foot, then you need to make a custom formwork. It's going to be a lot more expensive. Nobody going to do it. I'm telling you, believe me. If you are getting big slab, you are not getting. So it's not 9 foot. It's an 8 foot 8 inch. Plus, you have to remember, then you are adding another 1.5 inch sill plate. You have a sill plate, right?
Yeah.
You have to put a sill plate. So you can get another 1.5 inch, which is 9.5. But then you have to have a drywall on the ceiling.
Yeah, because then you have ceiling drywall, and that's like losing an inch, roughly inch or two.
Half inch. Drywall is half inch. So your actual height is 8 and 9 inch.
Okay.
So you said if some builder tell you, I'm going to give you 9 foot, it's not 9 foot. It's called nominal size. Like when I say 2x4, it's not 2 inch by 4 inch. It's just nominal. Actual size is 1.5 inches and 4.5, right? Or 3.5.
Yeah.
So don't get surprised because I have been through. So I explained to them, hey, okay, you want exactly 9 foot? Pay me another $10,000 because I have to make everything custom for you. But if you need, but in the rule of thumb is you will have 8 and 9, and you can have another 9.5 or 10.5. What happened is just it's not usual, but I was talking about a sill plate, right? 2x6 on the top of the concrete wall. Sometimes you can have a double. You can put 2.
Oh.
So that gives you another 1.5 inches, right? So instead of in 9, 8 and a 9, So now you have 8, 10.5. That's not still, that's an inch and a half shorter than 9 foot. But legally,
Yeah.
inch and a half is shorter. It's shorter, right? It's not a 9 foot. It's an inch and a half shorter.
That's just really interesting because I think when people think, oh, like there's 9 foot ceilings here, I don't think they're really thinking it's 8'9" instead.
People, because they don't go and check. But other ones in the framing, it's usually it's a 10. Yeah, it's a 10. You have a 9 foot ceiling, 10 foot ceiling. Actually, it's more than 9 foot and 10 foot on the framing because this pre-cut, it starts coming pre-cut. So they actually call, if you look at it, because you have a base plate, bottom plate inch and a half, then you have a top plate, double top plate, and you have a length of the stud pre-cut. It's, I don't know why. I probably have to ask them. But if you say 10 foot, the actual height is 10.18. And I don't know why they come up with 1.8. I have no idea. But all these pre-cuts come like that. It's a 10 foot, 1.8 inch higher, more.
Huh.
Okay, it's a 9, 1.8. Because
maybe it's because they know you're going to have to cut a little bit off.
No, that's what I'm saying. We're using pre-cut because this is how it comes. If you start cutting, like you have a big house, you start cutting, it's going to take you forever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they don't.
That's really interesting.
No, you use a pre-cut, already pre-cut for the 9 foot,
so
10
really
foot, 12 foot ceiling.
Yeah, so you're really adapting to the materials with your measurements in order to make it a more efficient process. So housing construction has really adapted to basically how manufacturers of materials have created materials.
Exactly, become a more cost-effective system, right? That's the standard size. That's your doors and windows. You have a standard size, you have custom size. If you do a standard size, definitely a lot cheaper. But windows, you can have any dimension you want. But if you go like strange dimensions, odd dimensions, then of course it's going to cost you double.
Yeah, for sure.
So those are the things sometimes you can keep in mind. You can talk to your builder. Hey, I want this. Sometimes I exactly need this one down to inches. And I say, yeah, sure, no problem. Then all of a sudden, 1 inch, you are paying $500-$600 extra just for that because you decided to choose 1 inch or 2 inch bigger than the standard size. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But a lot of times that cost is not worth it.
It's not worth it. So, but the problem is some of the many builders, they don't explain. But for me, I do because I say, hey, this is what you're getting. These are the standard size. If you want to do something different, no problem. But you have to remember. And sometimes they say, what are you talking about? I'm just adding another 2 inch bigger. But that's not how it is. You're making, because of the 2 inch, you're making non-standard element, you know, the windows and doors. And that makes a whole different scenario in terms of your cost per unit.
Drastic change. A drastic change. Yeah. Well, this has been really helpful, and I hope this was really helpful for everybody else. But leave us any comments if you had any more questions about how to estimate when things might cost a little more or a little less, or cost savings ways specific to structure, basement, foundations, footers, and leave us comments, and Raj and I will get back to you. But next week, we're going to talk about framing and estimating framing costs and ways to cut costs or save money, or things to look out for that could cost you more money. So we'll see you guys then.
Okay, bye-bye. See you next week.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you.